All right, so since some of you have been asking me about this, and honestly, I am kind of curious myself, is there a difference when shooting in D-Log between the Pocket 4P and Pocket 4? Not D-Log 2, but D-Log basically on both of these cameras. The reason why it's interesting is because the Pocket 4P has the new low-fix sensor, which has more advantages in terms of like dynamic range performance and all this stuff. But as far as I understand, it is only applicable when using the D-Log 2 profile and not D-Log. But let's see if it makes any difference when using the standard D-Log profile compared to the Pocket 4. So right now I'm using automatic settings with these profiles, automatic exposure and automatic white balance as well, but I am overexposing to the right by about 1.3 stops to basically get a cleaner image overall, because if you're going to expose D-Log properly, you're gonna get lots of noise in the shadows. From my personal experience, I'm trying to like make the shadows a bit cleaner basically, but soon I'm gonna sit down and do some manual exposure tests to keep this comparison basically as fair as possible. And at the same time, kind of you can like look at the stabilization performance difference between these cameras, because honestly I haven't been too impressed with the stabilization performance of the Pocket 4 or the Pocket 4P when doing this type of filming, selfie vlogging and using the active track at the same time. I think it is significantly more jittery on both of these cameras compared to the DJI Pocket 3. So let's do a couple of tests here with auto exposure just to see if there is any difference. I mean, the image looks identical on both cameras. There's no difference at all. And by the way, I'm going to use the color space transform tool in DaVinci Resolve basically to, accurately transform D-Log to Rec. 709, but I'm not going to do anything extra creative in post-production. I'm just going to adjust the exposure and that's basically it. All right, so now I switched to manual exposure settings on both cameras. I'm using ISO 400 on both of them with the same white balance of 6000 Kelvin, but the shutter speed is set completely differently. I'm using 1/1000 shutter on the Pocket 4 compared to 1/500 shutter on the Pocket 4P. And the reason they are different is because I wanted to match the exposure exactly on both cameras, at least, when looking at the displays. Right now it looks identical to my eyes, and I'm not gonna touch the exposure at all in post-production, just to show you how it looks pretty much straight out of camera with only the LUT applied, or like the CST applied, and that's basically it. Because theoretically, if I would have two Pocket 4s in here and I would use the same settings, the exposure should be exactly the same, but there's clearly a difference between the Pocket 4 and the Pocket 4P when it comes to how D-Log handles exposure with this camera compared to this camera. It seems like the Pocket 4P needs a bit more light to achieve the same exposure compared to the Pocket 4. Just for example, actually, let me switch to the same shutter speed on the Pocket 4P to show you how different it looks to the Pocket 4. And right now I'm using 1/1000 shutter on the Pocket 4P and the Pocket 4, and there's clearly a difference, at least, from looking at the screens of these cameras. They look completely different when it comes to overall exposure. And of course, I am not going to touch the exposure in post-production, just so you can see how different they are. So if I'm correct, it seems like the Pocket 4P needs a bit more exposure when using D-Log compared to the Pocket 4. So there is some sort of a difference between the sensor on the Pocket 4P's camera compared to the Pocket 4. All right, so now let's do something a little bit more interesting. First of all, I position myself in here with the light kind of like behind me to stress dynamic range performance of this camera to the absolute maximum, so you'll be able to see if there is any difference at all. And soon I'm gonna slowly start overexposing these cameras to the right by 1 stop at a time to see which camera will basically clip the highlights in here first. It will basically tell us which camera has better exposure latitude, basically allowing us to overexpose the shot or underexpose the shot, and then being able to recover everything in post-production. So this is more or less how it looks like at like 0.0 EV exposure, basically like proper exposure according to like DJI. But I am using slightly different shutter speeds with these cameras, again, just to match them as much as possible. I'm using 1/2000 on the Pocket 4 compared to 1/1000 on the Pocket 4P with the same ISO settings of 400 And then the white balance is also the same at 5600 Kelvin. All right, and now here is how it looks like with overexposing both cameras by exactly one stop. I think these cameras will handle one stop overexposure to the right without any issues at all. And now I switched to 2 stops overexposure. I think these cameras will also be able to handle this without any problems, without clipping anything in here, honestly. All right, and now I am overexposing by 3 stops on these cameras. I think the highlights in here will now be clipped, but let's see. All right, and now I am overexposing by 4 stops. I would be honestly very impressed if I would be able to recover these highlights in here from either of these cameras, because right now on the screen, they both look like completely blown out. It looks like a total mess, honestly. And I can definitely now see like some color differences between the two. It looks like the image on the Pocket 4P looks a bit more magenta than the image on the Pocket 4. And also the skin tones look a bit more yellow on the Pocket 4P compared to like more red on the Pocket 4. All right, so now I'm doing the opposite. I'm underexposing, and then I'm going to try to recover the information, the shadow information in post-production. So I'm underexposing right now by a stop, basically on both cameras to see if it looks any good or not, basically. Okay, and now I am underexposing by exactly 2 stops with these cameras. And I think this is as low as I will go, because I cannot really go lower with the Pocket 4 because I reached the maximum shutter of 1/8000. And unfortunately, I don't really have ND filters with me. And honestly, if I'll be able to recover this shadow information in here in post-production with barely introducing any noise with either of these cameras, I'm going to be pretty impressed. All right, so now let me get into DaVinci Resolve and show you some of the differences that I found between the Pocket 4 and 4P when filming in the standard D-Log profile. So first of all, because I know you will ask me this, here are my project settings: DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate for the timeline color space, and then Rex 109 Scene for the output color space because I'm using a MacBook. Now, as for the Node 3, it is very basic and simple. For the IDT, it takes me from DJI D-Gamut D-Log to DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, and then the DRT, which is the output device transform, it takes me from DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate to Rex 109 Gamut 2.4. And this is basically the same as using the official DJI D-Log LUT. It basically converts my D-Log footage to Rex 709. Now, between these 2 nodes, I have this balance node in here to adjust the exposure if necessary with the overexposed clips that I will show you later on in this video. And I'm just using a simple DCTL tool in here from Pixel Tools, which allows me to adjust exposure, white balance, saturation, contrast, all in one tool. All right, so the first difference I noticed between the Pocket 4 and Pocket 4P when filming in D-Log is definitely the saturation and the overall tint to the image. Like I said, I use the same white balance with both cameras, but as you can see, the Pocket 4 has like a very red tint to the image compared to the Pocket 4P, which has a more neutral look overall. I prefer, honestly, the look from the Pocket 4P. It looks a bit more natural and neutral. There's definitely a bit more contrast, as you can see, with the D-Log profile on the Pocket 4. Like if you look at my skin in here, the way it transitions from the skin to the shadows, I mean to the highlight, from the highlights to the shadows, it's very aggressive compared to the Pocket 4P, which is a bit more gradual, if you will. And also, if you look at the skin tones and the vector scope in here, look at the saturation. It reaches pretty high in here, whereas the Pocket 4P, it stops way lower. So my skin is definitely more saturated with the Pocket 4P, with the Pocket 4 compared to the Pocket 4P. And also, like, look in here, you will see like with the Pocket 4, you have like a slight magenta red tint to the image compared to the Pocket 4P, which looks more neutral at the same time. All right, now let's move on to the +1 overexposed shots. This is the Pocket 4 and the Pocket 4P. Neither of them are clipping the highlights, as you can see. I can see all the information in the highlights. And by the way, I've added like a simple node in here after the balance node to show you how easily you can recover highlights with either of these cameras, basically. So let's start with the Pocket 4. I'm going to enable this node. And as you can see, I mean, it is not the cleanest masking or like, you know, selection, if you will, but you can definitely see how I was able to bring back the information here in the highlights. And later on, you will see that the more I overexpose, the less I'll be able basically to recover this information here in the clouds or in the highlights. So you can easily recover information in the highlights if you overexpose by roughly like a stop with D-Log on the Pocket 4, and then also the Pocket 4P. As you can see, all the information comes back down without clipping anything here if you look like at the waveform and whatnot. Now let's take a look at the +2 overexposed clips, and here I'm definitely clipping. As you can see, you see this like white flat line, sorry. If I'm going to enable this masking node, you see I'm not really bringing any information back. It just becomes black basically, which means these highlights in here are completely clipped on the Pocket 4. And then if I'm going to do the same thing with the Pocket 4P, pretty much the same, because as you saw, the line in here was flat to begin with, which means the highlights are completely clipped. And now like the color differences are a bit more exaggerated, as you can see. Like with the Pocket 4, it becomes more red, right? The image becomes more red and magenta, whereas with the Pocket 4P, it becomes more green and like yellow. Like the more I'm going to overexpose, the more color artifacts you will see basically with these cameras. Now this is +3 overexposure, again, like flat line in the highlights. I would not be able to recover this, and a bit of a stronger like color shift, as you can see, especially compared to the like normal exposure. As you can see here, my skin looks healthier and like the image overall looks a bit more natural. Whereas in here, right, everything looks a bit weird. Like the colors are a bit different, and then also the contrast is a bit weird at the same time. And let me go to the Pocket 4P. Same case in here, the image becomes significantly more green and yellow, and there are more like color artifacts overall in the frame. And this is +4. Again, it is more exaggerated, as you can see. Like the contrast in here, I'm actually, you know, clipping some information on my skin, which is not a good thing to do with any camera, honestly. It's okay to like clip highlights, but if you clip skin, that is very distracting, especially if you have like a frame like this. And then here is the Pocket 4P, same thing in here. I'm clipping skin in here. I would not be able to recover this basically, and just the color tint is just way too strong. It's gonna take me like good 30 minutes, 40 minutes to just make this shot look somewhat pleasing overall. So I would say these cameras are safe up to like 2 stops of overexposure. I mean, depending on how you're going to light yourself, of course. Here I was backlighting myself, so I have less, you know, less contrast and less wiggle room basically. But if you're going to be in a scene with like flat lighting, maybe you'll be able to overexpose more without really introducing any artifacts. But I would say up to 2 stops, you're going to be pretty safe with the Pocket 4 or the Pocket 4P. All right, now let's take a look at the shots that I actually underexposed by a stop and then 2 stops. So first of all, this is the Pocket 4. And if I'm going to play this clip back, as you can see, there is definitely lots of noise here in the shadows. So I'll definitely need to like apply noise reduction and whatnot to make it look, you know, normal, if you will. Whereas with the Pocket 4P, the image looks really clean. And this is the same exposure method that basically underexposed both cameras by a stop, but there is clearly a difference in noise. Like the Pocket 4P, this is the Pocket 4P, it looks really clean, whereas the Pocket 4 looks significantly noisier. And if I'm going to switch to the -2 underexposed clips, this is the Pocket 4. As you can see, lots of noise. This is definitely too distracting, at least for me. Whereas the Pocket 4P in here looks significantly cleaner. This is the Pocket 4. And here's the Pocket 4P. Again, Pocket 4. And then here is the Pocket 4P. So I would say overall, there is definitely a difference between the Pocket 4 and 4P when filming in D-Log. I feel like the image on the Pocket 4P is a bit more neutral out of the box, and also it looks cleaner overall, especially if you're going to, by mistake, let's say, underexpose your shot. You'll be able to introduce less noise if you're going to fix the exposure in post-production. But when it comes to like overexposing your shots and then bringing down the exposure, it is more or less the same. If you do want to like, you know, heavily overexpose your shots with the Pocket 4P, I would recommend switching to D-Log 2, which will be significantly better than D-Log basically on the Pocket 4P. So hopefully you found this video to be informative and useful. Let me know down below if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye, and thanks for watching.